Ba-do-ba-do. Right, the obligatory 5 seconds going down, down, down. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good now to those of you out there in the universe, wherever and whenever you might be. My name is Ryan Erickson. As you see in the lower left of your screen, a contributing artist with the world-renowned consulting firm, Red 42. And with me today, as always, is the inimitable management exorcist and leadership philosopher of the globe. Beyond is Mr. Niels Flagging. Hello, Niels.
Hello, Ryan. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good now, good then.
Good then. Yeah, there you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, everything in between and beyond. Everybody's welcome here.
Beyond. Oh, that's another one. Beyond. Well, I was going to say beyond something. Beyond something. It's like there's another word that comes after beyond.
You can feel that your gender is in between, ladies and gentlemen, and beyond, ladies and gentlemen. Why not? So that's
beyond the binary. I had heard that before. Ladies, gentlemen, men, women, boys, girls, and anyone beyond the binary. So
in between and beyond. I think that's the most exact. And we talk a lot about the specifics, the almost physical science, or the let's say mathematical science of organization. Because Mr. Deming obviously was a physicist himself, right?
I didn't know he was a physicist. Okay, so the Deming scholar is on the right side of the screen. Yeah, so he was a physicist.
So he took a lot from the exact sciences. He took a lot of insight from the exact sciences, and he saw certain insights certainly as to be profound in an exact way, and unbreakable laws, unshakable laws of quasi physics that are applied to systems. So we will talk about that a little bit today.
Yeah, well, I'm wondering that there's so many themes about. Well, by the way, for those of you who may not have seen the title card or anything like that, we are today talking about W. Edwards Deming, a favorite topic of the beta universe, and Niels being the author of a wonderful book of quotes by W. Edwards Deming. There we go. A pair of What Would Deming Do books.
What would Deming do? Yes.
What would he do? And what would Deming do in terms of? Oh my goodness gracious! Look at that stack.
This is just a third of the books I have about or around Deming. Yes.
Wow.
There's a lot.
Yeah. So this also leads into my first, the first, I don't know, a question, but the reason why I was thinking about, well, how would Deming have approached organization design? Because in my limited reading, there's not really an articulation of this is the structure, this is how an organization should be designed. There's not really a point of view.
Yes,
I'm sure there's a point of view, but because
it seems there is no clear point of view. And from Deming's work, you might get the idea that he didn't have a clue, a specific view of organizational structure design, right?
Yeah, well, there wasn't a prescription.
Yes.
And which was interesting. Also, because of the time of his writing and his generation, there's a lot of talk of top management. There's the word leader that is peppered in through there, as we know, and that there's criticism of that, of course, as it exists now.
Yes, he uses the term, but not in a very dogmatic way. Yeah, we might get to that.
Yeah. And I think also this ties into again, how many themes can we bring in the first 5 minutes? But the idea of physics, and that Deming was a physicist, and when you're talking about org physics, we're talking about what are the principles that that create the foundation for designing an organization that is built for joy, performance, and flow. And so many different connections there. So Your words actually, the title of the episode today, kind of came from our conversation, and you brought in the specific. It was a surprise to me. You went kind of specific for joy in performance, or whatever it is.
Yes.
They came from you. And when thinking about organization design and Deming, what does joy represent for you? And I'll share for certain.
For me, you mean, or for Deming?
Yeah. Well, why was that? It's like, well, Deming and organizing for joy. What does organizing for joy mean? I
Yes,
guess
because
that's
when we had our little exchange about Deming and org design, something came to my mind that when I put together this book of quotes, what would Deming do? At the time, of course, I looked into his work. That's why I got all the books. I got all the books by Deming and about Deming. I tried to put my hands on all articles and interviews available. For example, there's this conversation, documented conversation with Russell Eckhoff that is scripted. So I went through all, and I tried to get through all his publications. I think one book that I enjoyed very much reading, I found very not delightful, but very rich, super rich, is The Essential Deming, which is an edited work by a woman called Joyce Nilsson Orsini, and she put together Deming's texts that were unpublished in other sources. So this is a collection of his own writings, and very nicely introduced and connected with little commentary. Very modern book design, I think. Very, very. It's a very nice book. But by sifting through all these sources, of course, I looked for patterns myself. If you want to put together a book like this with 160 quotes, you look for that are humorous, funny, witty, insightful, brilliant, telling. And of course, you have your own. You cannot free yourself from your own search patterns, right? For example, I was looking for quotes that were about decentralization. Teams, for example, right? And I didn't find decentralization or federalization or similar words used in his works. He just didn't use them, right? Now, we must keep in mind Deming's writings are from, his statistical writings are from the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and so on, 70s even. And then he slowly turned to more management-related topics, organizational-related topics, one might say. 80s, there was a shift, I think, at the end of the 70s, if I remember well, and then 80s, 90s, and so on. So, but decentralization wasn't a word he used. So, our title alludes to that, the title of today's session, that it's about organizing for joy, flow, and performance, which were all terms that he actually used or clearly alluded to. I'm not sure. Flow, I think he used.
I don't know. Flow definitely joy and definitely and performance, of course. The word flow, I think, is another interesting one, because we can talk when we're talking about joy.
Yes.
For me, I definitely relate that joyful feeling to one of Csikszentmihalyi's flow experience, right? That sense of being in the moment, being fully attentive to what's happening, and just being beyond the notes into the music kind of thing.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what I took from that bit of flow. And also, of course, from your work in lean, I think lean flow is a very very central, maybe not central theme, but
yes.
And of course the principles of the BetaCodex being flow coordination. So
by the way, he used the term flow. I can quote a quote to you that is, I think, essential to his idea of it's in the book, right? Because today I took a look again at what kind of quotes we might cite, and I think this is essential. But flow, he uses it in a different way, not as we today say flow. We understand it as a standalone word, right? When we say flow, it means so many things today. Flow of value creation and so on, or uninterrupted flow, because we have all this lean luggage with us. Yeah. Of course, there's
Lean
this
luggage.
psychological flow concept as well, being in the flow, of work,
Yeah.
being in the flow of, and so on. But here's a quote by W. Edwards Deming. It's from The Essential Deming, by the way, from this book. And it says here, a flow diagram is actually an organizational chart, A flow diagram is actually an organization chart. It shows how the different components, each with its expert knowledge, in our language, cells and teams, right, work together for the gain of all. If the components become competitive, if the teams or cells become competitive among them, the system is destroyed. Everybody loses. The greater the interdependence between components, the greater the need for communication and cooperation between them. This is self-structure design neatly defined, right? Even though the word decentralization or cells or team doesn't appear in this quote, right? And so I think this is maybe the key from the book, at least. I think the key quote about organizational structure, organizational design. Here's one that I think it adds nicely to that. You must not run your organization as a functional hierarchy. You must understand it as a system, period. But one might add of value creation, right?
Well, I was going to say exactly that. When we're talking about flow, value creation flow, it comes down to physics, comes down to org physics, comes down to the flow of value throughout a cell structure network,
Yes.
Which is just it's symphonic, if I might say, in that.
Yes, there's a book about Deming's work. Do you have it there right now? Can you show it?
I don't. I have it on digital here, but
it's called The Symphony of
Profound Knowledge, and
Profound
the prelude
Knowledge.
to this. Well, I was going to say the prelude to the symphony. I think is kind of in the same mode in terms of systems thinking. Being Deming was obviously a one of the great systems thinkers, right?
Yes, I always like to describe him as the first systems theorist who applied systems theory to actual work systems, to entire organizations, or to industrial production mostly. Yes, so he was maybe the first practical systems theorist, which is not true.
Being the theorist and Deming being the practitioner focus, maybe. Is that what you're?
Yes, I mean, Kurt Lewin, I think, was already also a systems theorist. I mean, his way of mapping structures, organizations, interactions, the field theory, the Levinist field theory, that was also a systems theory, and he applied that as well. Yeah, so he kind of he got a situation or a system described, and he mapped in a quasi-mathematical way, which many people found highly confusing, that a sociologist would use mathematical language and diagrams to describe psychological social interaction.
Yeah,
it is still very confusing to most people today. But if you look at it from if you take a step back, it was just a way of approaching systems theory. Yes. And Edwards Deming did something similar, but coming, of course, from statistics and physics. His approach was somewhat different, and then he added, as is well explained in all of his books, and so he added knowledge of psychology to that insight, and an understanding of I might say value creation.
Wow.
The system of profound knowledge.
God bless you.
Excuse me. Has all these facets, right? And from this come several insights. Individual performance does not exist, should never be managed. Targets should never direct people's actions, but the flow of value creation or the value creation must govern the organization, and so on. Yeah? So there are many outcomes of connecting. What I think Deming first did was connecting these elements. Good understanding of statistics and numbers and what they do, and psychology, and an understanding of value creation, and to apply that, especially starting in Japan in 1950.
Yeah. Oh, and of course, just the the beauty of applying these, now that Deming's principles in there have been disseminated, I guess is more, and to bring those into the principles of the BetaCodex and the 12 principles that I think they go to that. Well, most certainly it's about an intervention, about a design intervention,
Yes.
and being more specific about it. Now, I have to go back to the quote, but if I don't do that, the
Yes.
orchestral quote will leave me.
Yes.
But this is in the systems thinking mode as well. The
Yes.
prelude to symphony, an example of a system well optimized is a good orchestra. The players are not there to play solos as prima donnas, each one trying to catch the ear of the listener. They are there to support each other. Individually, they need not be the best players in the country. An orchestra is judged by listeners, not so much by illustrious players, but by the way they work together. So that doesn't say system, but if you think about what that's describing in terms of systems thinking,
That quote is
that
in here, by the way, as well. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so
It's certainly a great way to. I think he was always what Deming. What's truly remarkable, I think, in Deming's work is that he always distinguishes command control alpha, as we call it, from beta, or from the Deming system, the Deming mode of this is thinking.
Mhm.
So he does a nice job in contrasting these two worlds always, right? Even in this quote, there is this you can do it this way and that way, and those are two different modes of operating.
Yeah.
Just very, very, which I think enabled him to have so much impact as well, because he wasn't just describing a solution, the Deming way, but he always contrasted it with the reality, the flawed reality of businesses and organizations, how they did everything wrong, which is a thing that we build upon, of course, in the BetaCodex, where we always allude to, okay, this is how the beta way works. You can also have it alpha way, but it is damning. Yes, there will not be good solutions. There are solutions here, but they are terrible.
Well, you could eat garbage and it wouldn't kill you, but it wouldn't be enjoyable. It wouldn't be productive. So, but eat garbage or
Yes,
eat
it has effects. It has
French food.
effects, right? And I
Um,
think he did a very good. Deming did a very good job of making people think through the two modes of organizational existence, which are command control and decentralized responsibility, right? So
mm.
yeah, I think that's part of it. And do you want to talk about Boy?
I want to go into one particular, because we talk about this, and again, reading from that there was no mention of decentralization in there, so there's an assumption. I mean,
At
there's
least is there?
allusions to
Yes.
it, but it's in
Yes.
terms of non-competitive, integrated silos and those kinds of things. And I don't know if he says federalization either, but um,
Not to my
one
knowledge. Mhm.
um, the idea of the top management, there's a lot of the responsibility of top management to create the conditions to do that design. In other
Yes.
words, so the design thinking of how the organizational system is, what's the map? We're
Yes.
gonna draw the map and invite those who join the organization, who become members. This is the map that we have. So part of that feels a little bit impositional, a little bit command and control. But that's that. I mean, I think that's just me thinking, oh, being dogmatic and being binary about it. Oh, we can't have hierarchical control in any way. But that's not the world we live in. That's not truth. I mean, you have to have a skeleton in order to have a living body around it. So the the thought that I had there was that um, there is a quote about who depends on you, right? To be
Yes.
concerned about, I wish I had lined out the quote, but that there's one thing about who depends on you, and that we talk about in BetaCodex, like connectedness with purpose, not dependency.
It's on the back side of the book, right? When one understands who depends on me, then I may take joy in my work. It's important to understand that somebody depends on you. Somebody else depends on you to do your work, and that it creates joy in work. That is what makes more work meaningful. Yes.
And that's not a paternalistic dependency.
No,
That's, oh, I depend on you to tell me what my work is. No,
it's not the boss who depends on you. As Deming says so often, the customer is the most important piece of the supply chain, of the process, because without him, there is no process. There is
no.
By the
no
way,
purpose.
as for organization design, since the 1960s, 1950s, in the 1950s in Japan. Oh my God, how do I do this? How do I show this? Here, no, wrong page. No, wrong page. This is the right page.
There you go.
Sorry I should have tried this at home before. So he has this flow diagram that he showed in 1950, proven. He already used it in the 1950s in Japan to show that, and it's from the supplier to the external customer here on the right. So he had his way of expressing the structure of value creation. Yeah, he did not do that using the term decentralization. He depicted it as a stream from supplier to customer.
A value stream, possibly?
Value stream, of course. Yes, clearly a value stream, and the contributing factors. Yeah, so he had this kind of diagram, and this, of course, was part of his contribution to the history of organizations. He has to make clear that there is a value stream that other functions or components of the system, as he would say, contribute to, but they have this flow of value creation it must be in a way self-managed. It cannot be interrupted. It can be disrupted by management, but management is, as Deming always says, and it's a lot in these quotes, you'll find that management should not steer this process, but create the conditions so that this value creation can unfold. Yeah,
there is so much,
so that the system can work in that specified way of creating value. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think this specificity is an interesting place to go also, because there's a lot of talk about the words create the conditions, right? So what are the specifics about what kind of conditions are to be created, by whom, and what are the characteristics of those conditions? Because it's all fine, well, and good to say, oh, create the conditions for flourishing, right? That sounds wonderful, but there's no meat to that. So and it's just kind of a wondering. Because we talk about that. It's top management's responsibilities to create the conditions for value flow to happen, right? And I would say maybe the first one of those conditions might be that there is you're not going to be punished or measured, right? So that's
sure.
Possibly individual, like you as a person, the conditions for you to flourish psychologically, to experience that joy, is that there's not going to be sanction for you against you for making an error. So that's one condition. When you say creating the conditions, when you read that, what would be one condition that, to go specifically, that you would say that management has responsibility to create?
Oh, I think Deming is very specific about this, about the role of managers.
Yeah.
And he repeats this over and over in his work, that, again, managers, in our language, managers should work on the system, not in the system.
Yes.
Of course, we go a little bit beyond that in our work today in saying everybody should work on the system as well. Yeah. Also, workers should work on the system. And I think Deming is pretty damn close to that, because he also emphasizes that every component of a system, every team, so to speak, in the long run has to improve their work long term, forever, over and over. Yeah. Which amounts to working on the system. But he is clear. I would have to look up the specific quotes. Deming is clear that the responsibility of managers is to create the setting, the conditions, the system in which then others can produce actual value, or quality, if you like, say, or excellence, if you want to put it like that. So there's a call in Deming's work, which is absolutely explicit. There's no doubt about it, that managers should not dabble with the daily business, but restrain themselves to create the conditions.
Oh, this brings me to one quote.
But I'm looking this up right now to find it. Yeah.
One quote that I saw in there is that any dabbling, I think the word dabbling kind of brought there, to dabble to call out an error in a stable system is dabbling. It's tampering. It's if you have a stable system that's producing, high quality results, high performance, to call out someone in that environment is an impediment to the system, is not creating flow. And so this also comes down to incentives. If I have an incentive as a manager, for example, and the number of errors is what we measure, then I'm going to look for errors even when the system is performing optimally. So,
yes. By the way, I finally found some of the quotes here in the book. What would Deming do about? Maybe the one that nails it says, "People work in the system. Management creates the system." Yeah. So, which means you cannot blame the worker, and he says that very explicitly elsewhere. You cannot blame the worker for quality problems if you have created a system that doesn't allow for quality. Yes. Here's another one. People don't like to make mistakes. Change the system and the workers are suddenly a lot happier. They are no longer being blamed for what they have no control over. And that, again, is management's responsibility. He means managers, right? Executives, top managers, senior managers or senior executives. They are responsible for creating the system, the system that allows to produce quality. There's another quote here in the book that problems with quality must be made in the board.
Built-in quality. Oh yes,
yeah. If the board or top management creates a lousy system, then there's no way to produce quality. There's only way to produce error and lack of quality. So I think Deming was adamant about this, and this is brilliant. I think this is not to be underestimated. He says over and over in his way that managers are not supposed to do command and control or micromanagement stuff. They're supposed to work the fucking system and get out of the way, so that then people can have joy at work, and pride and focus on value creation. Yeah. And we are being ruined by the best efforts of people who are doing the wrong thing. And I think this is not about workers. This is about managers. We are ruined by the best efforts of people who are doing the wrong thing. Yeah.
Well, and this also came down. One of the things we talk about a lot is that people are not the problem, and that in nearly all cases, that if there's a problem, or Deming uses a great word for it, is that like a special variance or something like that. If there's a special variance that happens, that it's not the worker's fault. And that we talk about that. I got in a conversation recently that kind of hit me in an interesting way, and it led into what we are here today. It was that, and I said this, why are there so many bad software engineers? right? Why are there so many bad software engineers? So there's a lot of theorization about that, and so I come in there with the beta perspective and say, well, it's not the engineer's fault necessarily. You know, there's systems that they navigated and came to where they are. And so it's not about the people. And then the challenge to me was like, well, it's always about the people, and that, well, people created the system. So that's where we get, well, and the thing is, because it comes from a blaming point, right? Who is to blame for this situation?
Sure.
Well, it's those assholes who created the system, you know. So, oh, it's not my responsibility anymore. It's because it's those guys. It's them. So that was the piece that kind of hit me a little bit weird. Well, yes, there are human beings who have responsibility for designing and creating a system of work, right? When
Yes.
they birth an idea into the world, that this is how these are our principles of operation.
Yes.
This is our
Yes.
long-term plan.
Even if you should
So,
argue that there are lousy software developers, you might say, okay, who recruited them then? You know, who created the system that recruited that kind of person into that kind of responsibility or role? And so it always goes back to sloppy systems design, sloppy management, sloppy thinking, of course.
and
Ultimately, that's what Deming bashes. He bashes the absence of thinking, of solid theory, the quackery, so to speak, right? Which is not. And if you have bad theory, Deming always accentuates that, right, in his work. If you have bad theory, you can have the best intentions. It will not make much of a difference. Yeah. If you do not know, if you have no understanding, you cannot do a good job. By the way, I read this wonderful, a very small text, just 2 pages in this book. I think it's in this book as well, but I'm not quite sure. But it's in this book by Deming's decade-long assistant secretary, Cecilia Killian. She wrote this. She published this wonderful book of Deming texts, also entries from his diary and so on. And there's this wonderful article in this book, Contemplations on Teaching, where Deming says, it's beautiful. It's not in this book, so it's a beautiful quote. It says something like, you can only teach if you do research. If you do not do research, you have no knowledge, and you should not teach. Because you have nothing to teach. That's what he said in this quote. Yeah, if you do not research, you have nothing, no knowledge, and nothing to teach. Go out of the way. Students should, and that is very similar to this. We need to managers in Deming's mind, or leaders. He uses the term, and we can quote a little one about leaders.
Oh, I got the leader quote that I want to bring.
Oh, you got it? Okay, so then you can read it out in a second. Deming says that they have a very important role to play, which is not to command people, not to judge people, not to steer people, not to evaluate them, but to create the system that makes it all possible, and that requires a lot of thinking, a lot of theory about statistics, psychology, and value creation, ultimately. So this Deming's system of profound knowledge, this is why everybody should read this book, because it outlines this knowledge and gives you a good idea about what this.
Well, of course, in page in the last couple pages of the book, of course, we have Deming's 14 points.
Yes,
system of knowledge
14
in there.
points designed. I might say this cost me days, I think, to design this, even though it looks very simple. The 14 points on 2 pages. These are the Deming's 14 points. Very related to the BetaCodex, by the way.
Oh, absolutely.
The 14 points. Get this. You can look them up on the internet as well. But here they are. There are different versions. Some modified in a terrible way. So don't trust the internet about the 14 points. These are the, let's say, original 14 points from Deming's own book, of course. And they are very adamant They are totally adamant about what's right, what's wrong, what's alpha, what's beta, what creates joy at work and flow and performance and validation, and what does not. Yeah.
Yeah, he was definitely very, very clear about distinctions. Well, he was very, that's
Totally.
um,
Yes. Yes. He did a
a little
wonderful
bit.
job. Yeah.
Um,
Being clear at telling managers what to do and what
he
not.
was a thorn in the side. I read this, and he was a thorn in the
Totally.
side of the
Some people
management
apparently
at
called
Ford
him,
and GM.
perceived him as very, very grumpy or something like that. But he wasn't.
Well,
He
he
was
was
very humorous, I think. Very hilarious.
well
Not like
if
comedian, I think.
well, of course, he was. And again, some of the reading that when he did, I don't know if he did the first 4-day workshop at Ford. There was the people in the audience, they weren't asking questions. They gave the questions to I think the guy who wrote the symphony book on what are the questions that we have, because people didn't want to get called out. But
Yes.
they said that after this first session in the workshop day, that there were people who just felt intimidated by him.
Yeah, sure.
That
Like
and
superior intelligence, it intimidates people. I mean, being
yeah,
in a room with Einstein must have been very intimidating too, or with Kurt Lewin and so on. And I
yeah.
think he had a lot of charisma as well.
But
Look at the
the
photos.
kicker there is that the people who engaged with him and who said, I don't care, you're just a human being," really got a lot of learning out of that.
Yeah, and look at the
That.
recordings from the seminars. There's some on YouTube. Look at the recordings from the seminars of his from the early 90s. I think there are some online videos, and you see that people laugh all the time. He was very funny.
Yeah.
He had this. He had this very. He was. I mean, this is something that people, I think, do not understand. I certainly misunderstood this. When Deming went to Japan after World War II in 1950, he was already 50 years old. He was very experienced, very well traveled. He was not like most Americans who have never left the country. So he had done a lot of work on statistics and how is it? Yeah, let's say teaching as well. He had done a lot of teaching as well in the United States and beyond. Okay, then he goes to Japan, goes there until 7 times until 1965, or 6 times between 1950 and 1965, for longer periods of time, teaching in different cities to lots of people, doing all this work, counseling managers and engineers and specialists and so on. But he was already 50 years old. I'm 52, so almost our age, I think. Yes.
Yeah.
So he wasn't young. He wasn't naive. He wasn't inexperienced. And then that work he did in Japan, it had time to mature until he was discovered in America in the 1980s, when he was already more than 80 years old. Right. So keeping that in mind, he was no beginner. He was not naive. He had, for example, this understanding that his teaching in Japan to engineers, which he did in the first seminars. He did this first round of seminars and I document this in the new article on the BetaCodex website, right, about Deming between 1950 and 1965. So he did this course, 8-day course. No, I forgot. I think 8 days. Yeah. A long course. He did that in Tokyo for hundreds of people. Then in other cities, I'll have to look up which cities. The smallest one had 85 people on it. So he did these large courses, but he recognized at the time and agreed on this with the organizers from USE, the association, that this was not enough. They had to reach managers, which then happened in July 1950 at Mount Hakone, I think. That's the name of the location, where he had all company owners, senior executives, like CEOs in the room. Somebody, I think, later wrote that maybe 60% of Japanese industrial capital were there at Mount Hakone during those sessions. So this is, and I think this is a lesson we have to learn from. If we want to do beta transformation, we have to reach top executives. They will lend their ear if the conditions are right, but they need to understand too. They need the theory too. We cannot just, that's, I think, why the lean movement largely failed, or most of it failed, and left no traces, no impact. This is the same reason why Agile, by and large, has not gotten anywhere substantially and not changed the world as we all hoped it would, because we haven't spoken to top managers and changed their minds, changed their theory, improved their theory, their conscious level of consciousness, as I sometimes like to say. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I think
crucial to understand that you need this. This is not work done by the 20, 30-year-olds. The revolution in organizational reality will not come from 25-year-olds talking about some new way of thinking, but this is about people with experience and theory who can teach, who also do research teaching, and communitizing, so socializing certain knowledge that then enables top managers to, and together with others, to act. That's what we do in open space beta. That's what we do with self-structure design and so on, right? And I think Deming, in a way, he figured that out, that to have a lasting impact, you couldn't just teach the engineers. You always also had to reach top managers.
Well, if you just, this is also systems thinking too. If you just teach the engineers, that's sub-optimization. You're optimizing,
Sure. Which is exactly what he preached against, right?
Yeah. Which is interesting.
And who can reach them? Who can give them the theory? You need an outside perspective. That's also what Deming said. It's the role of the consultant. He didn't use a word, but the outside expert to deliver to provide the knowledge, as he called it. We would call it he said the knowledge of the system. We might call it the
data
theory,
information,
the theory of data, and so on. Yeah. So of course you need some outside. That's why I love books. That's why I make books as well, because I think books are a wonderful, delightful, and simple and easy and very cheap way to obtain knowledge that otherwise you could not obtain so well. So, which is also why I recommend the books, not just my book, but it's
a book about a good. Also, again, realizing that the Andre Gabor book has a great chapter on Deming. We talked about.
Oh yeah, it's a wonderful chapter on Deming, I think. Yes, I have to reread it. Yeah, thank you for hinting. Yes, that is very dense. Yeah, Andrea Gabor, Philosophers of, how is it called? The Practical Philosophers? Is it called like that?
And I got it right here.
The Capitalist Philosophers. Yes. A very good chapter on Deming. Very well researched. She's a journalist, researcher, one might say. Brilliant. She did a brilliant job of packing it all into like 15 to 20 pages, the Deming story, and there are others on followed and so on and so on. Brilliant book. Right?
Yeah, it's such a one.
The chapter on Elton Mayo, that should be taken with a dose of salt as well.
Considering our last conversation,
but nobody's perfect. I think that book is damn close to perfect. Andrea Gabor, The Capitalist Philosophers, is I think this book, the essential. Wonderful.
Well, there were one thing we were talking about research. I think, and that's when we say there's these components, is that there's theory and research, knowledge, the experimentation that happens based on solid theory. So that what is, when we talk about research, that research has to be based on some kind of theory, some kind of hypothesis, a question that you are attempting to use, that the answer to that question you have from the collection of data to provide some kind of predictive value to say, hey, this is a solid theory. So this gets to the point, well, that, and I think you said it a couple moments ago, this is from the quote, is that one of the responsibilities of top management would be to be researchers, to have
at least they have to have the mind of the researcher, the mind of the of the eternal student of organizational dynamics. Yes.
Yes.
Certain, of which again, science is as distinct and statistics and psychology are part. Yeah. Yes,
Uh,
yes. He very much accentuated that. Managers are supposed to be the learners, eternally looking for development options of developing the system instead of bothering
but
their work.
bothering the people who are actually doing the real work. Now,
Exactly.
the other thing again, we cannot talk about Deming and not be seen as hypocrites if we don't say, oh, he uses the word leader a lot.
Yes. Are
Okay,
we talking
so
about
I
the
have the quote. I
page
have the
94?
lead. We are on page 92. I have the page 92.
92. Interesting.
This is a longer quote.
Yeah, okay.
What is a leader? What is a leader? As I
94.
use the as I
Ah, you have
use
an
the
older
term,
version of the book. Ah, that's
yeah.
why. Okay.
Oh, because I gotta have a new version. I didn't know you had a new version. Anyway,
What is a leader? That's how it starts. Yes,
what
please read
is a
on.
leader? As I use the term here, the job of a leader is to accomplish transformation of the organization, of his organization. We'll say, take that gender out. He possesses knowledge. He himself has been transformed. He has personality and persuasive power. How may he accomplish transformation? First, he has theory. He understands why the transformation would bring gain to the organization and to all the people that his organization deals with, the customers, suppliers, environment. Second, he feels compelled to accomplish the transformation as an obligation to himself and to his organization. Third, he is a practical man. He has a plan step by step and can explain it in simple terms. That that there's a lot there that, ooh, is that really beta? Is it beta? We're talking about someone who's his organization, like an individual owns the organization. It's like, and he has a plan. He's just planning. I thought we were not about planning.
Well, the plan is
So,
the method. I would translate it because again, this is about. He starts this quote with "What is a leader?" So he has a very specific understanding of what is a leader,
yeah.
and of course he means. My translation, our interpretation, we don't have to agree, right? We are not saying that we are right about it, but my reading, contextualizing, and remembering everyone that I have read a lot of Deming stuff, but I'm not saying I'm right. Yeah. So what is a leader? He says it's the person taking responsibility for transformation, right? What does that person need? What does that individual need? First, robust theory. Second, willpower. I would say the will to do it, the job. Yeah, that's also what Ernst Weichselbaum says. The wanting of the entrepreneur. There's no substitute for the want of the entrepreneur. You cannot do
Desire, passion.
Yeah,
You might say that.
it's not passion. It's not desire. Desire is way off. No, it's willpower. It's the unshakable conviction. Want does that not? It's not a popular term in English, right?
Well, what we think want and desire are
No,
synonymous.
not that.
That's
Want
in if you
I
talk
really,
with
really
an
want.
ugly American like me, you want and desire tend to be synonymous. But you're making a distinction there.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I'm trying to reestablish a distinction between desire and want. Unshakable want. Maybe we find a better or different term. In German, we say das Wollen, the wanting, the will. Yeah, the unshakable. What it means is another German scholar in America, Friedrich Bergmann. He emigrated to the U.S. Friedrich Bergmann, who was the first maybe to use the term new work to describe a future of a very much Deming-esque idea of joy at work. And Friedrich Bergmann talked of really, really wanting something. Only if you really, really want something, you will do it.
Yeah.
Wanting is not enough. You have to really, really want it. Right? So that's what Deming talks about. You need the theory, you need to really, really want it, and you need to be practical. You need to be action oriented, as Tom Peters called it once. You have to have a bias for action.
Yeah, bias for action.
That's the step-by-step plan that Deming talks about here. You need another method for the doing, for the action research, for the for making it happen. So
Well, I think
really, really wanting it, and a method for proceeding, which of course we know the best method today available is open space beta. Deming still didn't have that, neither open space or open space beta.
Well, yes, you know,
Of course, we are
1993
interpreting
passing.
Deming's work here in the context of what we believe, what we think, right? This is not.
Is this where the disclaimer comes? Like, we don't have to agree. You don't have to believe what we're saying. Just do it.
Yeah. Of course, we're doing our best here to interpret the words of our hero in the best way we
one
can.
Of the many heroes.
Of course, I think the power. What's so interesting about Deming? I mean, he is history, right? As a man, he passed away in 1993, age 93. Yeah, so he was an old man by all means. And that happened 30. He passed away 30 years ago. So this is history. So we of course have to reinterpret his work in today's works, and he makes it very easy to do that. I think everybody reading his original books, like the new economics, there is a new edition, beta edition, with a foreword by his grandson, Kevin Kill. But this is an older edition, MIT Press, I think, second edition. Reading these things, it's very easy to understand what they mean today. You just have to really, really want to understand it.
And you have to take the time with it. You can't just say PDCA is Deming. Great, poof, the Deming cycle.
Which is not PDCA is the Shewhart circle. It was never the Deming circle. He always made that very clear. Deming was very precise about this. This is the Shewhart cycle, which is nice, but it's only an element of the discipline of a system of profound knowledge, right?
And I think he also says some he also says some heretical things in here. Again, I wouldn't get to the quote, but I think you'll know it about going to the Gemba, right? Which is this management by walking around. Going to the Gemba is not enough, because the manager goes to the Gemba and might get in the way of things without observing, may prescribe something he has no business prescribing, and just it might be interfering. So, and that I think is so. That quote, I have to dig into it and think about it and understand what it is. But because there's a lot of there's dogma about the Gemba, about management by walking.
By the way, can I throw that into one of the last quotes in the book here? Is management by walking around is hardly ever effective. The reason is that someone in management walking around has little idea about what questions to ask, and usually does not pause long enough at any spot to get the right answer. So the walking around must be done by knowledgeable people, by people with theory. As a manager just walking around, and I have seen this in factories, this was preached to me as well. Niels, as a corporate controller when I started my career, you have to be on the shop floor, you have to walk around. And so and I was always like, because I understood that I didn't know anything, right?
You have to be surveillance. You have to be a supervisor. You have to ensure and control and that kind of stuff. That's totally not the spirit of that.
By the way, here's one quote that I was looking for earlier. Management must constantly improve the system. This obligation never ceases. Towards the end of the book, there is a little chapter about the responsibility of managers in this book. I put it there consciously, not at the beginning, but at the end. Yeah.
This also gets into some nitpicks I have about language as well, which I think we could talk about. The idea of management as a group of people. It's like management is something that is done. It is, if you think about it, it's not a group of people. It's kind of weird to think about that. And especially even worse is leadership, using leadership to say, this is the leadership, right? The leadership. Anyway, so rant over. There are two other things here. When we talk about desire, I think there's a clue here in the quote, and we're talking about desire or want, compelled. What's compulsion?
Oh yes. The person needs to be committed, compelled in, and it's more. The quote says to himself and the organization.
Yeah.
Nothing else. It's a duty. so to speak, to transform the system. That's what Deming says. It's a fucking beauty. And that, I think, this is worth putting in context. Towards the end of his life in the 1980s and the 1990s, Deming always said that Americans didn't take the challenge seriously enough, or in the West, most managers, executives didn't take the challenge serious enough as the Japanese executives did in the 1950s, that it was their responsibility to enable the transformation, to unleash these transformations in their organizations, right? And he was adamant that Americans were too shallow, too superficial to pick up the challenge, to recognize that the dire straits they were in, and to act upon it, and that he regretted that very much, right? That,
like there was an ego problem. I think I seem to recall.
Sure, and a not invented here problem, and we are better than everybody else, and America is so great. Yeah, the MAGA thing was strong in people already at the time, right? So there was an implicit arrogance, even at the companies that I think Deming advised to with great success, like Ford, right?
GM and Ford. Yeah.
Even they later on, the CEO. I mean, he retired then after a few years of working with Deming. The then CEO wrote a book about the work with Deming in a way without mentioning Deming much. All these things are so sad, right? But and then in Japan, organization, because some companies in Japan took it, forever. They applied these principles. So that's what makes the Toyota case so remarkable, I think. They put in let's say the Deming way of thinking and operating has such deep roots at companies like Toyota that it is transformed again and again.
It's the why do they call it the Toyota production system? I mean, that's
again, they won the Deming Award in 1965. They felt in 1965 that they were good enough to apply for the Deming Award, the Deming Prize, as it's called, and they won it a couple of times then. But it's a long story, and that continues flourishing. Right?
Well, well, this reminds me of another one of the beta articles. I mean, it was that we can't learn a damn thing from Toyota and Semco.
Yes, one of my articles on LinkedIn. Yes, and then
it's interesting. I think about that. Well, one reason is that every organization's environment is different. The people are different. The systemic needs are different. And if we're talking about the core of a system being the interactions between people and the conversations and the information bonding, of course, every organization is going to be different in its own way, but we can apply the principles. I haven't read the article for a while, but that just came up like, well, what's the block between how Toyota has become and embodied the Deming way, the principles in their own way? Why is it that? Why can't we learn from Toyota and Semco?
Yeah, and I think Deming nailed it. For me, that might be the end of our conversation as well. The finishing, the high note to end with. In the first chapter of this book, the chapter is on people at work. It starts with people at work and ends with managers. Yeah, but here's a quote that I consider key for Deming and this topic we're talking about today. The quote is this: "What is at the heart of the transformation we're talking about? It's the release of the power of intrinsic motivation. How? By creating joy, pride, happiness in work, joy and pride in learning." That is the heart of the transformation. The heart, of course, is to make much, much better use of human beings at work and their intrinsic motivation, which everybody brings to work all the time, which is, so the whole matter that you just mentioned is ultimately, it all goes back to the way we perceive human nature at work. Theory X or theory Y?
Well, this maybe leads into the discussion today about W. Edwards Deming and the brilliant book that we've been quoting the whole time. What would Deming do? You know, both that and of course all the remainder of the books there. And maybe this is I feel like this is a series again, a series of books, right? What would Mary Parker Follett do? What would Douglas McGregor do?
Oh,
And
yeah.
these and there's
We should
so
do more
many
of these books. Yes.
yeah, and it's
And I
very
think we will.
wow. Interesting. So much more we talk about with Deming
Yes.
and for sure. We didn't even talk about what I maybe it will be next week's conversation about measurement and
Yes.
the use of statistics and the quantitative side of this and
Yes.
how can
Let's
how
let's
do
do
we
that
go
next
into that?
week.
All
Let's do
right.
that.
Oh, let's see. Do we have as I turn on the music to land us into the beginning of my day, the second half of your day, and Lord knows
Yes.
who's having what part of their day now. For those of you who might be watching now or into the future, wow, what more can we say about Deming and that we have not yet said?
Maybe everybody, if you haven't seen it, dear listeners, if you haven't seen it, take a look at the betacodex.org website. We have this new article there. You find it on the homepage under the news posts below. And it's a collection of newly colorized, colored articles, photos of Deming from his work in Japan in the 1950s and 60s. And for the first time, these photos, you can see them in colors, and I think they're wonderful. So it's worth zooming in and taking a look at the details, and learning about Deming in his prime, in his 50s and 60s when he worked in Japan. Of course, a very different country, very exotic. The photos give away a lot of details, a lot of information.
Yeah.
About the history.
And the article is more than pretty pictures. I think that's the thing. And we do.
Yeah, it has. Yes.
No, I was just going to say. And speaking of pretty pictures, I will put up the picture of today's theme, and we can check out with that. Thank you, Niels, for being here every week. It's always a joy to be in flow with you in the pursuit of high performance. And for those of you out there, thank you for the precious gift of your time and attention. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.